Kirdebar amiramirulba. Mengunya ho. Mengunya davitsa. მოგესალმებით პატრიციულ მაყურებლებო. დღეს მორიგი გადაცემის ჩაწერა გვაქვს. სანამ უშუალოდ სტუმარზე გეტყვით, მანამდე შეგახსენებთ, რომ ჩვენ ბევრი გადაცემა ჩავწერეთ ამერიკელი წერლის და პროფესორის, ეკონომისტის, კენ სკულანდის წიგნის შესახებ, რომელიც წიგნიც გამოცემულიც გვაქვს და უკვე წარდგენილია და პრეზენტაცია გაკეთებულია სხვადასხვა უნივერსიტეტებში და სკოლებში. ამ წიგნის გარშემო და ამ წიგნში აღწერილი თემების განხილვა ჩვენ არაერთხელ გავიკეთებია და კიდევ ბევრჯერ გავაკეთებ დაინტერესებულ ადამიანებთან ერთად. ბატონი დათო როგავა იყო ჩვენი სტუმარი ამ საკითხზე და დღეს მომეხმარება გადაცემის წაყვანაში. ხოლო თავარი სტუმარი ჩვენი არის ამერიკელი პროფესორი Ayn Rands ინსტიტუტის სამეცნიერო საბჭოს თავმჯდომარე ბატონი Yaron Brook-ი, რომელიც თავის შესახებ გეტყვით. ცოტა მოგვიანებით, მანამდე შეგახსენებთ, რომ Ayn Rands წიგნები ქართულად ჩვენ ნათარგმნი გვაქვს და გამოცემული გვაქვს რამდენიმე წიგნი, მაგალითად Ayn Rands პირველი წყარო, რომელიც გამოცემულია მეგონი 2 წლის წინ, 3 წლის წინ, კი არ მახსოვს ზუსტად. ასევე გამოცემულია ატლასმა მხრები გაშალა, გამოცემულია ჰიმნი, სულ Ayn Rands 4 წიგნი ჰქონდა და ძალიან საინტერესო და მნიშვნელოვანი წიგნები ამ მნიშვნელოვან პრობლემებზე, დაახლოებით იგივე პრობლემებზე, რაზედაც ჩვენ კალიბრის თავგადასავალში ვლაპარაკობდით. თუმცა ამ საკითხებზე უფრო დეტალურად და უფრო ზუსტად ბატონი იარონი მოგვიყვება, მაგრამ გასათვალისწინებელია, რომ საუბარი წარმართება ინგლისურ ენაზე და იმედია დღეს თქვენობით ინგლისური ენის გაგება ან თარგმნა პრობლემას არ წარმოადგენს. Please, Yaron, say something about yourself. I make a small.
Sounds good. I mean, I'm the chairman of the board of the Ayn Rand Institute. I've been involved with the Ayn Rand Institute as CEO or chairman for 22 years now. I joined in 2000. I also manage a hedge fund and one of the managers of a hedge fund. And before that, I was a finance professor. I put on conferences about Ayn Rand, and before that, I was a civil engineer. I don't know how that happened. I grew up in Israel, emigrated to the United States after serving in the Israeli army for 3 years.
Yes, I know you served in the Israeli army, yes?
I was in the Israeli army 3 years, one year or almost a year in the tanks. And I know T-72s. I'm responsible for the destruction of a few T-72s. And I was then in military intelligence. So tank corps for a little bit and then military intelligence during the very early 1980s. Yeah, that's kind of my story. I've authored books. I'm known as a speaker and a lecturer. I've traveled all over the world. I've probably given talks about Ayn Rand and objectivism in, I don't know, 40, 50 different countries around the world, Asia. Only place I haven't talked about Ayn Rand is Africa. We have to fix that, but I haven't done any talks in Africa. But all over Europe, almost every country in Europe, and South America, Asia, and of course America.
Maybe you will say a few words about how did you find Ayn Rand?
Yeah, of course. So when I was 16, living in Israel, and I was like almost everybody in Israel in those days, I was a committed socialist. Israel was very...
Everybody in Israel?
All young people in Israel were committed socialists. Most people, I'd say, in 1977 is when I read Atlas Shrugged, and it was the first year that the socialist government didn't win the election. It was the first year, so things were shifting in Israel, not only in me but also in Israel. It was the first time the right-wing government won. Begin, if you remember Begin, he won that first election in 1977. So I'd grown up a socialist. Everybody around me was a socialist. My parents were socialists. But it wasn't a socialism of the Soviet Union. It was a soft socialism. You had many freedoms. It was a great place to grow up. And a friend of mine basically handed me one day and said, "You should read this book." So I went home and I started reading Atlas Shrugged, and I didn't like it because it completely contradicted everything I believed in. The socialism, I was a very collectivistic, very strong on collectivism, Jewish collectivism, nationalism, Israel, the greatness of Israel, fighting for Israel, being, sacrificing.
But you managed to go read it thoroughly.
But then I kept reading, and the more I read, the more angry I got, but the more, I used to say, she can't be right, this can't be right, this is impossible. But the more I read, the more she convinced me, and by the end of the book, I was 100% committed and bought into the ideas, and then I read all the other books, and the rest is history. But that first experience with Atlas Shrugged, it took me 3 months to finish Atlas Shrugged because I was fighting it. I didn't want to agree with it.
Yes, it's quite a struggle when you.
It was a struggle, yes. I know some people it just confirms what they believe anyway. For me, it was a struggle.
Very interesting. Sometimes I think that to be a socialist, it means that you have less education. No, education in real mind, not the mind of Ministry of Education, but.
I mean, it means that you don't, I think, if a lot of people when they're young, they're socialists because that's all they know, but I think if you stay a socialist after learning history and after learning a little bit of economics and learning about the world, then it means you're probably evading, you're ignoring reality, you're pretending reality is something different than what it is. Socialism is a ugly fantasy. And I think once you know history and once you know a little bit of economics, there's no question about the evil of socialism. So people have to evade in order to continue to be socialists.
Yes, many people say like this. I remember outer Soviet Union, it was said like this. Socialism is a very good system, only not realistic.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the great.
I don't agree about this.
No, I know, and I think that's one of the great tragedies of the world is that people still think socialism has a moral worth, that it's ethical, that it's good because it's equal. But no, socialism is bad morality, bad morally, bad as an idea, and the implementation is horrible. I mean, Ayn Rand always said the moral is the practical. The practical is the moral. If something works, it's probably good. If something doesn't work, it's probably bad. Given how many times people have tried socialism and it's failed, probably bad. Through and through bad, not good in some aspect, but through and through bad.
Sometimes it can fail in another deals too. It does not mean that it is bad. For example, fails one time, fails second time, maybe 10th time can be reached this.
Well, it depends why it's failing, right? I think socialism is failing because it goes against human nature. So it will never be succeed. So fail, and then continue to fail. Because it's going against the nature of man, which is as an individual and as a reasoning, thinking being, and trying to take this individual and force him into this collective mold that is socialism will always fail.
But why it is popular, for example, in Israel, you can tell it for your example, for your experience, why is it popular? Why people do not open their eyes and...
Yeah, for example, in Israel, I think it's a lot less popular than it used to be. Israel has stopped being socialist, has become much more free market. And I think people respect that. I think socialism is popular in the world because it is a political ideology consistent with a morality that most people hold. And most people hold a morality that basically puts the emphasis on the other. They call it altruism, otherism. It's a morality of sacrifice to the other, and the idea is that it's okay to sacrifice some for other people. And the idea is that ultimately we should all have about the same. We should all be equal in outcome in some way. And that moral code is dominant in the West, and its political application is socialism. So even every time socialism fails, people say, okay, but what now? Because my moral code is a moral code of sacrifice and equality. That fits socialism. So maybe the problem is not with socialism. Maybe the problem is how we tried it last time. Let's try it again. So there's an idealism about what socialism is, and there's an idealism about the moral code that drives it. And the real tragedy in the world is that nobody is willing to challenge the moral code. Nobody's willing to say, no, it's wrong to sacrifice. No, the collective is not more important than the individual. No, we cannot and should not be equal. We're not equal. Metaphysically, we're not equal. And the economics should reflect that. And no, we should not just follow the collective. We should think for ourselves and be individuals. There just isn't. Ayn Rand was the only thinker who believed that, and her works are not popular enough, and they go up against this culture of conformity, non-thinking, and just accepting what the tribe or the collective wants to do.
To say shortly, I think socialism is immoral. One question, and another question is theoretical. Only theoretically, the aim cannot be reached. Cannot be reached. So it will fail every time.
Yes.
Whenever they try.
Yeah.
So if you do something, it should be at least small chance to be real.
Yeah.
Became real. But socialism does not have that chance.
It doesn't have a chance because, as you said, it's a bad morality, and theoretically, just from an economics perspective, theoretically, it cannot succeed because it's central planning, and we know central planning can't work because the central planner can't decide my values for me and can't reflect those values. So, yes, socialism always has been a failure and always will be a failure, and the only question is how many people it kills. Because it does kill. It's just a question of how many.
Maybe some cases it does not kill, but
it kills. It kills in all cases because one way or another, poverty kills. It makes people poor.
Yeah.
In some cases, it kills slowly, maybe.
Slowly.
In other places, it kills very, very fast.
Yes.
So it's a disaster, and it kills the human spirit. It kills entrepreneurship. It kills. The drive to be a motivation and drive to live a great life. So I think it's spiritually definitely a killer.
So
was morality the main aspect that catched you in Ayn Rand in this philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, what I loved about Atlas Shrugged and what I love about Ayn Rand philosophy, but what really caught me when I first read it, was the idea that your life was your own. The idea that your purpose in life should be your own happiness and your own success and using your own judgment, your own mind. I think this independence and this morality of rational self-interest, rational long-term self-interest, that was an inspiration because, after learning that your purpose in life is to sacrifice for this people and those people and reading stories about, if only I can jump on a grenade so that I can die for the glory of whatever. Suddenly somebody comes up and gives you this vision, this beautiful vision of what life can be as an individual and the happiness to achieve and the moral values to pursue. That, I think, was what really changed my mind, and really inspired me and has driven me and motivated me my whole life. It's the prospect of happiness, the prospect of being successful and living a great life and loving life. Socialism is dull, and the morality of altruism is self-destructive, and it drains you of motivation. And this inspires you. Ayn Rand inspires you to be the best human being you can be and live the best life that you can live.
How much time did it take to change your mind after reading this book?
I mean, basically my mind was changed. Once I finished it, it was changed. But then you have to fill in the details. And that took years to really understand it and to really integrate it into your life. That took, 10 years. It took a long time. Because first you think you understand everything and you fight with everybody, but you don't understand anything. You just read a book. But it takes a long time to see how the book is relevant in life and in your own life, and to integrate it in your mind and to figure out how to make arguments and what arguments are good and what arguments are bad. It takes a long time, but that's the power of it. Once it's done, it completely integrates into everything that you are.
It's common. It's characteristic for when you read Ayn Rand and you get this idea, something is new, something you just confirm your old ideas. But it's common that you have some desire to share this idea.
Yes, yes, very much so.
Tell everyone to put this in other minds also. Was it in your case at once?
Oh yeah, I started fighting with everybody, and I was obnoxious, and I was not nice, and I was not friendly, and it was not good. And I think most young people, because in a sense you're young, you're 16 or you're 18 or 22, and you read this book with a new philosophy and a true philosophy. And even if you think you accept it, you don't know. You don't have life experience to know. So you have all these ideas as what Ayn Rand called a floating abstraction. They're not connected to anything. And you get all excited and everything, but you don't really know what you're talking about. And it takes a long time to integrate those ideas and connect them with everything else and connect them with life and experience. And then you realize, oh, this is what it all means. And this is how, and the best way to explain it is to connect it for other people into their own lives. When you start fighting with people, you also realize that fighting doesn't get you very far. But young people, it's inevitable. If you just hand them Atlas Shrugged on a silver platter, in a sense, which we all were, it's going to take them a while to integrate it.
So it's look like that this book makes some sparkle in your mind.
Definitely, definitely.
So I cannot remember which book makes sparkle in my mind, but actually I like this book too very much. But when I read it, I was already in this position. Okay, now we can continue about the situation we had received 2 or 3 years ago in the world, like this COVID hysteria, as I call it. And I think you agree to me that it was hysteria, not.
No question. I mean, COVID is a deadly virus. It's not good, and particularly if you're old, and particularly if you have certain comorbidities, if you're obese, or if you have diabetes, if you have heart disease. COVID is very bad for you, and a lot of people ended up in hospital, and a lot of people died. But what happened was, because COVID came out of China, the way China reacted to it was the way China reacts to stuff. Shut everything down. Lockdowns, authoritarian method to deal with problems. Send everybody home.
Yes, the problem is, was this way correct or not?
Well, it's never correct.
But all the world decided to...
Yes, but that's my point. My point is everybody copied China.
Yes.
So when the virus then arrived in Italy, and suddenly, and Italy is an old population, and a lot of people were getting sick, and a lot of people were dying, the Italians panicked. They didn't know what to do. There was hysteria because they knew that it affected old people, because they knew that from the data from China. They could see it in their own hospitals, those old people, but they panicked. And they said, okay, the only other country that's dealt with this is China, so we'll do what China did. And then other countries started doing the same thing. And then America, suddenly the virus arrived in America, and New York panicked. Now also, the virus was known in January, maybe even December, but certainly in January it was known. The Trump administration did nothing. They pretended it didn't exist. They pretended there was no COVID. So by the time they suddenly realized, oh, there's COVID, they didn't have anything they could do except shut everything down. So in the United States, in New York in March, they shut everything down.
I remember Trump halted finance this WHO.
I don't know, maybe, but Trump...
Yes, I remember Trump decided not to finance them.
Yes, but Trump also encouraged New York to lock down.
Yes.
And to shut everybody at home. Trump.
But it's local governments, this is in the sense.
No, but he put pressure on them. And then when Georgia wanted to open up, he told them that's a bad idea, don't open up. So Trump was the source of the panic. Because the source of the panic is, he didn't do anything. He just sat back, instead of leading and saying, look, there's a virus, here are the people sensitive, here are the people not. The people sensitive should stay home, people not, you can live your lives. Instead of dealing with it like you would, like an adult, instead of dealing with it in a rational, thoughtful way, Trump either ignored it or panicked about it, and as always, He behaved like a child. A number of times he said, "It's going to go away." How do you know it's going to go away? Yeah, it's going to go away. I'm going to make it go away. It's going to go away. And it was just ridiculous. Instead of having no plan, no system in place, he had months to prepare. Could have prepared in January, February. No preparation, no testing. America had no testing, so a lot of people died and didn't have to die. And instead, what they should have done is they should have told people, look, here's who's at risk. We suggest that the people at risk wear masks, stay home, be careful. And young people, you're not at risk. Do whatever you want to do. Just don't interact with the people at risk. So in a sense, kind of help isolate old people, help them get food, help them so they don't have to contact other people, and let young people, which is most people, let them live. The disease is primarily deadly for 65 and over, and for people with comorbidities. So take the comorbidities, take the 65 and over, and help them survive with some isolation, and let everybody else live their life. But that was not, and generally, and this is the objective's point, I think, let people make the risk decisions for themselves. If I want to take risk, or if I'm healthy, even if I'm 65, who's the government to tell me I can't leave my house, or I can't go to the grocery store? It's my business, not theirs. I'm going to die, not them. So, the whole mentality was, we will dictate your risk level. But different people have different risk tolerances. I understand that some people are very afraid, don't want to they can wear a mask, they can wear 3 masks, I don't care. They can stay at home, I don't care. The government shouldn't subsidize them, but the government shouldn't penalize them. And let people make their own choices about life. But what the government could have done is helped old people get food and things like that so that they didn't starve in their home while they were in lockdowns. Other than that, testing is always good, but of course what happened with testing is, in the United States, I don't know what happened here in Georgia, but in the US, the government said, we're going to make the test. Nobody else is allowed to make the test. So they went and made the test, and the test didn't work.
We should import this mask.
So they lost 3 to 4 weeks while doing their own test, and then they said, oh, okay, private sector, you can make the test. And then the private sector could make the test very quickly, because it's a private sector. We know central planning doesn't work. Private entrepreneurs do work. The same thing happened with masks and with all these things. Every time they wanted the government to centralize it and do it, it failed. As soon as they let the private sector do it, they done it. And even vaccines. I'm very pro-vaccines. I think vaccines are a good thing. But even vaccines, they could have released them earlier. They could have said in the summer, they said, look, it's a vaccine, it's experimental, we think it's 100% safe, but there's always a risk. We're going to do tests, but in the meantime, since people are dying, why not get a vaccine shot? And get a vaccine shot, and you'll be part of this massive study, and maybe we can enroll 1 million people, and we'll see exactly what happens. If I, as an individual, wanted a vaccine in August of 2020, even though the vaccine was available, I couldn't get it, because the FDA hadn't approved it. The government hadn't approved it. So even though the vaccines, you know how long it took to develop the vaccine? 2 days.
And after that it was testing.
And after that it was testing to meet the FDA's requirement. And then I remember in November the FDA said, all right, we're going to consider emergency authorization. It's an emergency. So we'll let you know when you get the emergency authorization. 3-4 weeks? Like when there's an emergency in business, that means you work 24/7 and you get it done. And at the FDA, an emergency means, okay, in 3 weeks we'll get to it. It's just unbelievable. Then they could have saved hundreds of thousands of lives if they'd given the injections earlier.
And the worst thing is that no one takes the responsibility. No one even apologizes. No.
Oh, well, nobody thinks they're at fault. And unfortunately, what's happened in America is the right thinks thinks the vaccines are evil and thinks that everything associated with COVID is an exaggeration and it was no big deal. The left thinks we should have locked down everybody even more. And nobody has learned any lessons. No lessons. Nobody's apologized. Nobody said, I'm sorry. Trump, the only thing Trump did was good, was he sped up the authorizations of the vaccines. Now, because vaccines are not popular, he's not even taking credit for that. So even the good things they don't take credit for, and the bad things they don't admit. He would never admit that he made a mistake. So nobody's learned any lessons from this, and next time it's going to be worse.
To refer it to the book, the Atlas Shrugged, when I was reading it, it's kind. You feel that it's kind of exaggerated. The whole society is exaggerating, but when we saw this hysteria, and what happened in the society, it was not exaggerated at all.
Not at all.
It was happening in real life. So.
Yes. I mean, during the financial crisis in America, it felt like Atlas Shrugged. It felt like Atlas Shrugged was too moderate. Yeah, because people were saying insane things, crazy things. And during COVID, the same. And the mentality of, we'll follow orders no matter what. Like, everybody knew, I mean, it was pretty obvious that outdoors, with the wind blowing, you're not going to get the virus because it was airborne. So it blows away. And it's tiny, I mean, if you're outside, you're not going to get it. And yet, you had to wear a mask outside. Sometimes you weren't allowed outside. We would go and walk for a park and the police would come and they would tell us to go home. My wife was swimming in the ocean. They said, come out, go home. Can't swim. She said, what, the fish are going to get COVID? It's the law. You have to follow the law. You know, it's a stupid law, right? Because they didn't want people at the beach. So it was this mentality of follow orders, follow directions. When they locked everybody down, everybody followed them. Everybody did what they told them. So we weren't allowed to leave the house except to go grocery shopping. But we had friends we liked to go visit. So what we did was every time we would go in the car, we would take a grocery bag and we would fill it with things. So if the police stopped us, we would say, oh, we were grocery shopping. But those are the kind of stupid things you had to do to go visit your friends. Why is it anybody's business if I want to visit my friend? If we all get COVID and die, it's none of anybody's business. Why is it the state's business that we want to hang out during COVID? So the whole thing was outrageous, and it was indicative of the mindlessness that the American people and the people of the world really were willing to accept authority, you know, kind of mindless way. Fear was dominant, but you know, you'd expect that reason would be able to overcome that, but no. And again, the evidence was very clear. I remember in February looking at the statistics from China, and it was very clear and that everybody was reporting this, and I was talking to a friend who's an epidemiologist, and he was saying, old people, they're the ones. If you're young, this is probably not going to do anything to you. We knew that in February of 2020, and yet people panicked, and young people panicked. You know, even at the end of the COVID, I would go to universities, and the people who were wearing masks were the young students. I would go
in the schools too.
Even if you get COVID, what's the big deal?
And masks itself are like petri dishes. They transfer the bacteria rather than stopping.
They can, if you wear them right. If you wear them right, they can protect you and another person. But in large groups, nobody wears them right. And
literally no one wore it. In here, people wore it on their elbows all day, and when they go in the stores, they put it on.
And then you go into a restaurant, and they said, you have to wear the mask to go into the restaurant. But once you sit down to eat, you can take it off. And when you go to the bathroom, you have to put it back on. It's like, what, when I eat, the virus doesn't attack me? Only when I walk, the virus attacks me? It's just stupidity for the sake of stupidity. No thinking.
What would be the vaccine for this stupidity of the society?
I mean, the vaccine is independent thinking. The vaccine is to learn to think for yourself. The vaccine is self-esteem. The vaccine is Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand's philosophy is the vaccine. You know, she teaches us how to be independent thinkers, the virtue of independently thinking. And then once you become an independent thinker, then you attain self-esteem from your own achievements, and you're trusting your own mind. That's what we need. We need thinkers. We need people who can think for themselves and are not just tribalists who follow the group and follow orders.
And we need to discuss these questions many times like we do now.
Absolutely. We need to remind us, and people need to write books about it, and people need to blame the people they need to blame. My worry today is that the right in America is blaming all the wrong people. They're blaming the scientists. They're blaming the vaccine creators instead of blaming the politicians, and blaming the people who followed like sheep and demanded some of these things. And you know, and some of the government scientists deserve blame, but not the pharmaceutical companies, not the vaccine companies, not your doctor who made just recommendations based on the science. And the other thing that's happened because of COVID is a lot of people don't trust science now. They resent science, and that's a disaster. If people reject science, which means they reject reason, we're finished.
So I would like to ask about one thing. I mean, not ask, but to say my mind about. For example, as I know, in Florida they had no regulations there.
Well, not true. So in the beginning, they had lots of regulations. Everybody was locked down, and they weren't the first to open. The first state to open was Georgia. Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. The governor of Georgia opened up the state first, and then DeSantis opened up Florida. And then when he opened it, he kept it open. No more locked ups, no more thing. And then he didn't have vaccine mandates, and he didn't have, and they had fewer mask mandates. They did in the beginning mask mandates, and then also they did away with them.
So it's very important case to compare different states with different regulations. So it should give us correct picture what happens with regulations, without regulations.
To some extent, but the problem with the vaccine is it's very difficult to control for all the factors. A lot of people still died in Florida. Some other states, fewer people died. It's hard to draw conclusions about what worked and what doesn't. But the point is, I think, the important point is that even if it worked, let's say locking everybody at home actually reduced deaths.
Let's say.
Let's say that, right? It's still wrong. It's still wrong. I'll give you an example. If we have an order in Tbilisi, all men must stay home between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. every day, the number of rapes in Tbilisi will go down.
Yeah, maybe.
No, for sure. Men rape, usually at night. The number will go down, no question. Is that good? No, you can't justify. We're not consequentialists. We can't justify a violation of people's rights because of a good outcome. So even if you lock everybody down and we have fewer deaths, it's wrong. And as you said, it's not even clear that that's the case. Certainly in Sweden. Originally they had a lot of deaths, but over time they had fewer deaths than many other countries, or about the same, even though they didn't have lockdowns at all. But Sweden didn't do a good job, for example, protecting old people. They got old people very exposed in old age homes and nursery. So the right balance is not that hard to figure out, but it has to be guided by the principles of freedom, by the principles of liberty. It's never right to lock people away, unless it's for a very short period of time because of an imminent threat. Like if there are terrorists running around the streets here, the government says, stay home because we're trying to kill them and we don't want to shoot you, so everybody stay home, lockdown, right? But then it ends. As terrorists are killed, it ends. You can't have it go for weeks and months and have no standard for it finishing.
We do not ban traffic or cars.
Yes, if nobody drives, there are no accidents.
No accidents.
Yes,
Exactly.
no one will die.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Anyway, so we somehow finished this COVID situation.
Yes, somehow.
Somehow, yes,
Yeah.
because some people say because of Russia-Ukraine war, no one speaks about this COVID.
No, we already were getting over it before, and the numbers are coming down, and the variants of the virus are less deadly and less harmful. You just get a cold now. You don't even get the flu, and very few people go to the hospital. So it slowly diminishes, which is exactly what scientists predicted. They said, viruses like this, they're very strong for a while, and then slowly they become less and less and less, and we develop natural immunity and the vaccines. So it's gone slowly. And the Russia-Ukraine thing has gave the newspaper something else to talk about.
Yeah. So the situation in the world changes every time, but by my view, the biggest problem is that next time all the governments will use the same tools against another new
I think that's right, and it's a real threat. We haven't learned the lesson. We haven't learned the lesson.
So I think we should somehow not punish, but sometimes, anyway, it is possible to use this word, punish them who is responsible for this question.
Expose the responsible people.
We have to expose them and but so on, but it's very difficult because in politics it's very difficult to hold people responsible.
Yes. Hold people responsible.
Very difficult to hold people responsible. Well, it's politicians, local government, the state government, federal government, it's all over the place and it's very difficult. And a lot of times you have two people, the alternative is two people both bad.
How about the WHO itself? We should punish them.
What's VHO?
WHO.
The WHO. I mean, you don't want to punish them because they actually provide valuable information and they could do a good job. And they weren't the ones recommending lockdowns. They didn't recommend lockdowns. I mean, the amazing thing is that the WHO guidelines for dealing with the pandemic do not include lockdowns. The lockdowns were done by local governments in every one of these countries. And in England, initially Boris Johnson said, no lockdowns, we're going to keep it open. And then some study came out from Oxford and it said, millions of people are going to die, you have to lock down. So he said, okay, I changed my mind, we'll do a lockdown. So who are you going to punish? The study author? Boris Johnson was punished, he's out, but not because of this, but because he had a party during COVID or something. So we're not even punishing them for the right reasons. So, and WHO...
How about fearmonger?
What's that?
Fearmonger. They were creating fear in people.
Yeah, but how do you punish somebody for fearmongering? It's very difficult to punish somebody for fearmongering.
So, no, when I say punishment, I don't mean that we should put them in prison, but it should be major responsibility for
yeah,
them.
But
only to explain to most people what happened really.
I mean, my interpretation, I mean, I don't like the WHO, but my view of the WHO is they were providing information. The data they provided early on in the pandemic was pretty accurate. It's the choices we made based on that information which were disastrous, and those choices were made by local politicians, and they're the ones who should suffer. But we never penalize politicians. Politicians can kill millions of people and they become heroes. How often do we punish a politician for something that they did? I mean, one of the reasons I will never vote for Donald Trump, ever, is because of how he performed during COVID. He was a terrible president during COVID and I will never vote for him. That's me punishing local politicians. I wouldn't vote for the mayor of New York because he locked down New York. I wouldn't vote for people like the governor of California, locked down California. I wouldn't vote for him. But I'm just one vote. California voted for him again, and and lots of Republicans will vote for Trump, even though Trump was a terrible COVID president.
So actually he was not a real leader in this situation.
No, he was the opposite of a real leader. He was an anti-leader.
Okay, so now let's say how should be society built that see like this?
The only way to do that is for people to gain respect for their own freedom and their own liberty, and you don't. That's not at the expense of the science, but you know.
Yes. How can we
need to have freedom and liberty. We need to teach people about what happened in COVID and what the alternative was, an alternative would be. Deal with the science, deal with the facts, look at the facts, and develop a response that fits the facts, not fear and hysteria. Learn how to use your mind, learn how to reason, control your emotions, control your fears, and respect individual liberty. Individual liberty must always be respected. The government has no right to violate my individual liberty. Now, if they know I have COVID, and let's say in the beginning when COVID is fairly deadly, and they know I have COVID, and I go and I spread it on purpose, then the government should take me and put me in isolation, right? Mm-hmm. But if they don't know I'm infected, they have no right to touch me. Right? I have individual rights unless they can prove that that there's something wrong with me, that I'm doing something bad.
Well, actually, the philosophy is the answer.
Yes.
That's why philosophy is so important.
And the philosophy gives you all the tools to deal with emergencies, to deal with crises.
Here is like this problem. It's easy to find answer for yourself. but how to explain it to most people in the situation of democracy, it's a very hard question.
Very hard. It's very hard, and people resist it. So it's a real challenge. Explaining people, teaching people, educating people is very hard, and it's not quick. It takes time.
It takes time, and also Ministry of Education in USA have Department of Education, as I remember.
Yeah.
Works against it.
Absolutely. That's why the government should not be in education. Education should be private. There should be no government in education.
But anyway, it is better to we discuss now the question how it should be done in modern society to live normal society. So how should it be built?
How do we go from here to that kind of society? I mean, the only way is to educate people about the value of freedom and liberty and how to think and how to live a moral life. I don't think there are any shortcuts on how to get to an ideal society. The only way is educate. It's about philosophy, it's about ideas, and it's going to take a long time.
So when we speak about education, it does not mean for the it does not mean that you need to know very many things for the people.
And it doesn't mean you have to go to school. It means you have to get these ideas. Yeah.
What I mean, responsibility. You should understand that you are responsible for yourself, and no one has right to take from you your freedom.
Yes, but the reason you want freedom, part of the problem is most people don't want freedom. So one of the things you have to teach them is the value of freedom to them. And one of the things you have to teach them is to value their own life and to value their own happiness. So, people who value their own life, who value happiness, who want to succeed, who want to achieve things with their own life, they are people who want freedom and want liberty because they want to use their own mind. And if they believe everybody has the capacity to take care of themselves and the capacity to think for themselves and live a good life, then that's how you achieve liberty and freedom is you have to convince people of the value of it, the value to them.
Yes, easiest question is whose belongs your body? It was in our parliament, he knows. And you can remember maybe better.
Well, but the government does own your body because you can't, if you want to sell one of your kidneys, you can't. It's illegal, you go to jail.
Yes, it's illegal.
So it turns out they do own your body.
And
if you commit suicide, that's illegal.
It's illegal. They may punish you.
Then they could punish you if you fail. But it's not your body. They think they own your body.
Yeah. Yes.
You can't take drugs. I'm against drugs. Drugs are bad, but it's none of anybody's business if I want to do harm to my body. But it's not my body. They tell you what to eat and what to drink and what drugs you can take, what medicines you can take. They want to control you, and they know this by controlling every aspect of your life.
Same way they are doing it with the abortion now.
Yeah, they want to tell you when you can have kids and when you can't have kids.
Yes, and very interesting is that most people agree in this question to the government, and opposite of this, most people think that rich people are bad people.
Yes.
And this is very contradictory in their mind or something like this. Why do they think so? Because if someone is rich, why he is bad? And if someone takes my freedom, why he is good?
Well, I think they think that rich people are bad for a couple of reasons. One is a lot of people have a zero-sum perspective on the world. So they think if somebody got rich, they must have taken it from somebody.
Yeah.
They don't see that wealth is created, that wealth is added. So they think if he got rich, I got poorer. So I don't like him because he made me poorer. And they don't see that him getting rich makes me richer. Right? I benefit when he gets rich because the only way to become rich is to add value to other people who we trade with. You get rich through trade, which means other people are also benefiting from the trade. And the second reason is that if you got rich, he must have been self-interested. He must have followed his own independent judgment. He must have tried to succeed for himself. And as a culture, we believe that self-interest is very negative and very evil. So they're immoral and they stole from me. Right? So we hate the rich. But if you understand that you can't become rich unless you trade with somebody value for value and make them richer as well, And the way you become rich is by making people better off, making the world a better place. And then if you understand that everybody should take care of themselves. Yes, he pursued his own happiness, he pursued his own self-interest in becoming rich. You should too, everybody should. And you don't measure self-interest in terms of money, you measure self-interest in terms of happiness. The success of self-interest is measured in terms of happiness, not in terms of money. Money is important.
Money is only tool.
It's just a tool, and it's only one of the tools. There are many tools.
Yes.
And what is happiness, by the way? This is a side question for...
I mean, happiness is kind of a state of being, of contentment and satisfaction. Ayn Rand called it a state of non-contradictory joy, where there are no conflicts inside of you, where you're just happy to be around. This life is good. You're enjoying being alive, and it's a constant state that builds, and you attain it by achieving your values, by succeeding, by doing good things to achieve the values that you believe in. And as you achieve them, the happiness kind of builds up and it builds a foundation.
So it's not an instant emotion. Or
it's not an instant emotion, and it's not something you can simulate with drugs.
Yeah.
It's not serotonin. It's a build-up, a certain emotional build-up that builds up over time as you succeed in achieving those values. It's a state of being. It's a state of your consciousness, a state of being for your consciousness.
By my mind, the happiness is the only thing we do everything for ourselves. We do everything for our happiness. I think so.
Well, I think some people do and some people don't. Some people do everything so they would not be happy.
But maybe they are happy because of...
They're not happy. Most people are not happy. I'd say 90+% of people are not happy.
Why do they do like this thing?
I don't think they like their life. I don't think they do it because they don't think. They do it because their mother told them. They do it because society told them. They do it because the government told them. So they do all kinds of actions that don't lead them to be happy, that maybe lead them to have less conflicts with their neighbors, but not to achieve happiness. Very, very few people act to achieve happiness independently and think through what is necessary to achieve happiness and think through the values that they would need in order to achieve it.
That means they don't mind when they do like
Yeah, but I don't mind doesn't mean that they're achieving happiness. You know, you can be. What did Pink Floyd had a great Pink Floyd, you know, the rock band.
Yeah.
What was it? Something numb.
Uncomfortable.
Comfortably numb. They are comfortably numb. They comfortably don't feel anything. They're comfortable in their mindlessness and emotionalness. That's how most people live. That's a great line from Pink Floyd, comfortably numb. And I think that's how the world is. There are very, very few people who live and who enjoy life and who are happy and embrace their existence. So many people are just there.
Okay, so
what to continue with the philosophy of Ayn Rand, what are the, just briefly, main virtues? How can we get to this state of happiness? Or
I mean, the main virtue, and to some sense, you can summarize the whole of Ayn Rand's ethics in one word. The main virtue is to think. The main virtue is to reason, is to be rational. Rationality is what makes us human. It's what allows us to achieve our values. It's what solves our problems. We need to think them through. There's no other way to solve problems other than to figure it out. And it enables human survival and human existence.
Conventionally people think the other way. They just connect thinking with the sorrow, with unhappiness, with the troubles.
No,
and happiness is connected with mindfulness.
Negating thinking.
Yes,
I think it's the other way. I think it's exactly wrong. I mean, the reality is that every time you get into trouble, every time you get into a bad situation in life, it's usually because you followed your feelings.
Yeah.
And not because you thought it through. And it's almost never the case that you say, I thought too much about that. I probably didn't think enough about it. I should have figured it out more. I should have devoted more time to it. So thinking is really what it's all about. And then the other virtues are related to that. So one of the most important virtues is productiveness. You have to create the material values that you're going to consume. They don't come out of thin air. They don't come out of nowhere. You have to apply your mind to the problem of survival by creating the values that you're going to consume. So you have to be productive. You have to build, you have to create. And this is why rich people are good people. Good without knowing anything else about them. Just this activity is good because they're producing values, they're creating stuff, and then they're trading with other people. You've got to be honest because rationality requires facts, and you don't want falsehoods to corrupt the mind. You've got to have integrity because otherwise you split yourself. Happiness is impossible when you're fighting against yourself. Integrity means do what you say, don't do something different, but pursue rational values, good values. You've got to be, what am I missing? Just. You've got to treat people the way they deserve. You don't want to surround yourself with horrible people that are going to do damage to you. You've got to be independent. Thinking means you're thinking. Nobody else can think for you. And you should be proud. That is pride. That is you should strive to be the best person you can be. You should strive to live the best life that you can live. And when you achieve something, you should recognize that achievement and acknowledge that in your own mind. It doesn't mean being boastful. It doesn't mean, looking down at other people. It means that you should recognize your own value.
Well, so you mentioned quite good thing that the rich person himself may be good or may be bad, it does not matter, but the action he does is good for others.
Mostly, unless he's a crook.
He cannot be rich.
Unless he's a crook.
Yes.
Unless he's a criminal or gangster or somebody who gets money from the government,
that's
right?
Or
A lot of them
politician.
Yeah, but then, if you're a politician, then you're a crook, right? If you're rich and a politician, you're probably a
You
crook.
can't call them crooks because they will say like we are.
Well, I always wonder how politicians go into politics poor and come out rich. There has to be corruption because they're not creating any wealth.
Otherwise they cannot. Okay, we speak quite much time, more than we said previously, so we can go to finish now. But if you would like to say something.
No, I mean, I think people should read Ayn Rand. I think it's a life-changing experience. It's an incredible value. It really will enhance, I think, the quality of your own lives. I encourage your listeners and watchers to go pick up an Ayn Rand book, and they're in Georgian, so you have no excuses.
Yes, I recommend this book. This is Ken Skulan's book.
Yes.
In Georgian language, not only in Georgian, it's in many different languages. So if you cannot read this big book,
Read the big books.
Book.
Read the big books.
But read this big book is very good too. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tato, if you would like to say something again.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Thank you to Nasha, and see you next time. Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.